further ado, let's move on to our next talk. So I'm super excited for this talk. I want to bring on Ryan and Piers to talk about the future of gaming. Ryan recently just joined as CEO of Polygon Studios, and Piers heads gaming at Delphi Digital. And these two have an amazing chemistry and so many amazing things to talk about here. So I'll let Piers kick this off and kind of take over and interview Ryan. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome both of them here. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks a lot, Kartik. Yeah, super excited to kick this one off. Ryan, you've now officially joined the dark side of crypto, so right. Excited to be able to chat on that side of things. So yeah, perhaps you could kick us off with just a sort of general intro, a bit about you, and sort of what's led you to where you are now.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm the CEO of Polygon Studios. I think this is actually the first time I've said it out loud in a formal setting, so exciting to do that, Piers. I'm in kind of a transition phase right now, juggling both roles. I'm making sure, as the former head of gaming at YouTube, that I unwind and leave them in good hands, and transitioning up, working with the studios team. And it's been great. Like, what a fun experience. Looking forward to diving in more and more with that team. But that's what I'm up to. And you're right. I've long wanted to jump in full time into the Web3 world and come to the dark side, to your point. So I'm excited to do it.
Absolutely. Yeah, perhaps you could sort of like tell us a little bit about sort of why Polygon, where the decision came from, kind of what that whole process looked like.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I spent almost 7.5 years at YouTube, and I started the gaming vertical there, right? And so when I joined YouTube, we were just under 1 billion users on the platform. Gaming was this really, emerging vertical, and they didn't have a team to kind of work on it. So I joined the organization as the head of gaming and started to build out the team, build out the vision, build out the strategy. And I loved it, right? Because in the early days, I was an esports player and commentator and broadcaster and streamer. And a lot of people back then would be like, look, who wants to watch people play video games, right? And so I kind of took that on as like, I think people are going to enjoy this. And so I spent the next 10 years of my life really focusing on that business, growing the creator economy and so forth. And so what happened was I started to spend, I prided myself on knowing the gaming industry really well. And then all of a sudden, blockchain gaming comes up and it kind of hits me like a ton of bricks. And I'm like, wait, what is this? I was not leaned into DeFi. It was not this like huge area of interest for me. I wasn't like totally inundated with crypto. And so I started sitting down and looking at this and I'm like, wow, this kind of like, it really was very enlightening, to say the least. And so as I started to spend more time with people in the industry, more time on it, I was like, this is such a fascinating space. I feel like I really want to spend more time in it. And it largely led me to spending more time, back in early August with the Polygon team, and just like spending time working with them and seeing what they're up to. And, such a hardworking group of individuals that have a chip on their shoulder that is building really something special on Ethereum. And so it really was like, look, like, let's figure out how we can do more of this and how I can kind of join. And one thing led to another. And now I'm excited to jump in and lead our studios team.
Super exciting. Yeah. Maybe you could talk to us a little bit about, what the sort of immediate objectives are for you and the team at Polygon Studios. What's the next sort of 6 to 12 months look like for you guys?
Yeah, look, there's a lot. There's the best part about kind of this industry is, it's fast paced, it's growing. There's no shortage of things to do. I laugh, Sandeep and I were talking the other day and he said, yeah, it's really easy to know crypto if you can spend 16 hours a day reading, right? And so, a lot of what I want to do is get really acclimated with the organization first and foremost. They've done a lot of great partnerships. You saw us announce, us doing stuff with, NFL and Ticketmaster. You saw us doing something with 100 Thieves, the esports organization. So that studios team has been doing a really great job and a lot of work. And so it's like, how do we actually add fuel to the fire? I think it'd be really great to stand up our organization and hire for really key roles that we have. So we want to continue to bring Web2 folks that are enlightened and have, red pilled, if you will, and are ready to come over and join this movement. And so I think what you'll start to see is a lot of like marquee hires come over to the studios team over the next couple months. And then really it's us working as a collective group about what is our vision? What do we want to accomplish? What's our messaging externally and internally? How do we make sure we have more operational and organizational rigor? How do we make sure we're showing up big at events where, gamers and game developers are coming together? How are we making sure that we can better streamline and support non-gaming initiatives, whether it's Prada and Adidas or so forth? So it's really like, you have this blank canvas because there's such a huge appetite and demand to already work and build on Polygon's network. So how do we actually just add, a really strong partnerships team to that and a really strong brand identity to it and make sure that as people come in, they're excited to build on Polygon. They're choosing Polygon because it's the best place to build on. And that's what we're really focused on. And we definitely believe we're going to accomplish that vision and more.
No, it's super cool and very exciting to hear, there's more red pilling of Web2 folks coming over.
I'm bringing them over left and right. Believe me. I think the funny thing is, I think people look, they worry that, they're interested in it, but they don't know everything about it. And I think a lot of people don't realize that there's a tremendous amount of humility in the Web3 industry of we all don't know everything about it. And everybody has different skill sets. Everybody is learning every day. There's so much that's happening in this space to keep up on. And so I think what you're starting to see is people naturally wanting to come over, but not know how best to do it or what role they have to play in this world. And so as you start to have these conversations with Web2 folks and you see what they've been able to build, it's no, that's exactly the skill set we need to bring over into Web3, make the jump. It's going to be worth your while. We as a collective industry are building something really special here. And I think I love just the overall spirit. I'm working at, former role in big tech, highly competitive. What are we doing against Amazon? What are we doing against Facebook? And even though, yes, there's competition that's happening in Web3, really the spirit of the community is we're building something special together as a group here. And so it just is much more of collaborative. And so I think people are not used to operating in an industry like that. Even in the games industry, where it's hyper competitive between an Activision Blizzard and an EA and an Ubisoft, you see so much more collaboration and just positive vibes. And I think, that is the spirit of we're going to make it and all of this, And so I think people as they get introduced from Web 2 into Web 3 are naturally going to continue to lean in. And I think we're going to get a lot of great talent from that industry to come over and build this thing.
Absolutely. I love it. And what would you say then, I guess, from your time at YouTube and perhaps beyond, were some of the core learnings that you feel like you're gonna be able to bring across and kind of, sort of put to work over here? Curious how sort of that translates into this whole new world of Web3.
There's a lot. I think at YouTube, learning how to build apps that, and products that scale across a variety of the creator economy. So we built a lot of stuff that at first was made for gamers, right? And with gaming creators and gaming users in mind. And what you find out that a lot of that ends up being broadly applicable. So standing up products and being able to scale them is a really important learning that I had over the last 7 years. I think how to set up a world-class organization that generates billions in revenue for the company, gaming being one of the largest verticals at YouTube. How we set our strategy, how we market ourselves, how you handle competition, right? YouTube is no stranger to significant competition in the space with Facebook and Twitch and the deals that are being done there in the creator economy. So I think there's a lot of there's a lot that I learned at YouTube that resembles what is needed in this field and how we're going to continue to build out the organization at Polygon Studios. And so I'm looking forward to kind of taking a lot of those growing pains and learning lessons that we had. And look, it's a little bit different because like I said, when I started at YouTube, we were just cracking 1 billion users and we're well over 2 billion now. So a lot of what I learned is how to take a platform from 1 billion to 2 billion, but it'll be fun to figure out how we take it from, 50 million to 100 million to 1 billion. And that's actually what gets me really excited about this space is I think the 1 billion to 2 billion was quite the quest and path. And I think those learnings will actually really help us accelerate our timeline to how do we just get 1 billion people, on crypto and working on the Ethereum network and all of that. So I'm excited.
I love it. You heard it here first. Polygon for 1 billion users, not too long. They're lucky to have you.
Yes, that's the dream. That's where we're going to get to. And I think everybody is certainly aligned and running in the right direction. And everybody has a role to play in that, from the developers themselves to the people that are working every day at Polygon.
Mm-hmm. And then curious for your thoughts at sort of a higher level about where we're at in the evolution of these, the intersection of sort of blockchain and gaming. How do you reflect? How do you think about, is this really a new sort of genre of game, a new type of game? What are the sort of, differences? What are the things that jump out to you about, blockchain gaming versus what came before? Is this really yeah.
I want to riff on you because I want to hear also, I want to hear kind of your perspective on it. I look at it this way. Look, at the end of the day, when you're developing a game, no matter what, take the idea of blockchain outside of it, you have to make a really good game. First and foremost, there is so much capital being deployed into the gaming ecosystem. you are seeing a lot of these big macro level acquisitions that are happening across Take-Two and Microsoft and so forth. So there's just a lot of money being put into game development. And so because of that, there's like a lot more optionality for gamers to go play any kind of game that you could ever imagine. And it's great. That's why you have 2.5 billion people on this planet that are playing games in some way, shape, or form. And obviously across that spectrum, it can be super casual of like my mom playing Candy Crush at the airport, all the way to like me being a hardcore like tactical shooter player, right? And everything in between. The great thing about the gaming industry is there's something for everybody. And I think that opens up this aperture of users participating in it. And it's almost like gaming is going to just be like synonymous with entertainment and culture. Everybody's going to do it in some way, shape, or form. And I don't know if we'll even call it video games long term. So when I think of like what's unique about like blockchain gaming, it's like making a really great game first and foremost is important. And then I think opening up this economy where you can play and earn and you can do all of these things with inside of it. You can have a governance token. You can own your actual and have like true, genuine digital ownership. You have resale value there. There's like, you're really democratizing development in a lot of different ways. And so I think, yes, it's like a little bit of a cop out, but it's like, yes, it is. It's a new subsection. And a lot of the counter arguments you always hear is like, yeah, you could do it with a centralized SQL database and these things that kind of already exist. Look at Diablo 3 auction house, yada, yada, right? But the fact of the matter is there's really not a lot of games that are plugging into what does it look like when you have these free open economies and marketplaces. And so it's becoming really easy to build those, in Web3. And so I think what you're going to see is people, yes, they're going to make these high quality games first and foremost, but they're really going to start to think about, okay, I have another tool at my disposal to make a great game because I'm building it on the blockchain. What does that actually mean for me? And like, what can I actually do with that? So I'm interested to see, I think you're going to see a convergence of a lot of these different things. And the other thing to, be mindful of is over time, like it takes time to make high polished AAA games. You're seeing a lot of these projects of really talented developers leaving Activision, Blizzard, leaving Riot, leaving EA, leaving Ubi to start their own companies, and they're getting funded to do it. And they are their aspirations are to build these like beautiful, high polished games. And those are on the horizon. We haven't even seen them yet. And so I do think there will be a pretty meaningful shift of players moving into games, blockchain based games. And you're going to see that over the next 3 to 4 years. Look, I'd love to see, you yourself are like at such a great intersection of this, of what you're doing between Bitcraft and Delphi. Like, what's your thoughts on what this unlocks in the gaming space?
Yeah, I mean, I think the part that excites me the most still is definitely, obviously this whole thing's a spectrum, right? Degree of integration of these technologies. We're going to see a lot of very high polished games that are exciting, that do like pretty vanilla NFT integrations for, pure cosmetic, non-balance impacting stuff. Cool, fine, new way to monetize, new way for people to engage. That stuff's super exciting. But I think this whole new, further out to the right end of the spectrum, this whole new sort of, it's like what is like uniquely enabled by, leveraging these technologies for the first time, right? I think the way you can like sort of start to build things where there's this kind of emergent gameplay in a really interesting way, and like literally the community picks up some kind of, base that's been built around these things and like just runs with them in such interesting ways. So a lot of the stuff I've seen around on-chain gaming, things like Dark Forest and all the stuff that OX Park's doing, that kind of stuff excites me enormously. It's like, the community is playing a material like front seat role in the world building itself after the developers kind of define the parameters and like primitives for those game worlds. And whilst we're like, probably a decade away from those things, like the concept of on-chain gaming reaching the stage where, you can do it with any kind of graphical complexity or anything like that, that stuff's really exciting to me. And I do think, when we can build ecosystems where there's like meaningful community governance and, people can actually like help drive the game in interesting ways and contribute to it, that stuff's really exciting to me because we just don't really see a great equivalent, in terms of what came before. So we'll see. It'll take time. I'm here for it though. I'm most excited about things, trying to ask the question, like, what can we do now that we couldn't before, like in a very meaningful way. So we'll see what comes of that. We'll see. I
agree. And it's kind of like, what we see now is simply just scratching the surface of the possibilities. And I feel like, when you look at conversations publicly are happening where there's like strong kind of, it's very polarizing on just the topic of NFTs, right? For a variety of reasons. And I think as we're able to, as a collective industry, illustrate more complex examples of what like NFTs can do and what blockchain gaming can do, and point to those examples publicly and say, like, this is it. Like, this is why we were excited. Because I think right now, it's very hard for those that are not really in the industry. It's very hard to articulate that vision in a way that makes sense and is coherent, to somebody that like is not, that might be like very foreign to this concept. And there's obviously a lot of things that are going to happen between now and then. We'll address some of the more macro issues, environmental concerns and carbon footprint and so forth. But I agree with you. I think like game development takes on a whole life of its own when you start to look out 4, 5, 6 years from now. I do think, to your point, it's like right now when developers are looking at like how do we really harness our community, they're doing it like via Twitter or Reddit posts. When you can actually make genuine product decisions and game decisions at a macro level because of governance, like that's a really cool participation. Or to your point, like games that evolve because you're like able to democratize development of a game, and really you just are kind of setting the parameters, to your point, and letting the community run free. This changes the way games are inherently played right now in a whole different way. I also think too, these shifts in user bases that will be coming over and participating in these, ecosystems and games is going to materially change the way free to play is looked at, right? Because I do think you're going to see a shift of, for lack of better terms, whales that are participating and really hold up free to play games, right? It's like a combination of people with money and a combination of people with time. When you start to see the player base that is actually investing heavily into these games start to find equivalent games that are blockchain based, that is really going to change like the entire industry. And I think it'll require then AAA publishers to really reevaluate what kind of games are they making, how are they making them, and how they should be participating. The other thing too is like not every game needs to be a blockchain based game. So we don't have to deal with like absolutes on these conversations. It's like I don't want my son to have to worry about like, buying Ethereum and playing in a volatile economy or anything of that nature when he's like 7 years old, right? Like there are games that are going to be much more well designed. And so I think the other thing in these conversations are people too largely are dealing in absolutes when having these conversations. It's okay to like have a unique subsection of the gaming industry where this is happening.
100%. And like, we often hear pushback around even just the notion of governance in games, right? Like the community is never going to make good decisions. Like, handing over the parts of the development roadmap to them is going to be a car crash. Like, again, that's not binary. It's not like one or the other. There's like this intermediate scenario where, you have things like delegated governance, right? There are people that emerge from the community, which other players recognize as really dialed into what's happening in terms of direction of travel, how the economy is evolving. And they might be willing to basically, delegate their votes to these people who act as like representatives of the player base to, help coordinate these decisions and stuff. I totally agree. It's not about absolutes. It's like everyone assumes it's always binary when it's not. I think we'll find a healthy middle ground on it.
And that stuff takes time, and like even a democratic approach to like what you're talking about, and like almost like elected officials within communities that are the ones. I mean, like I love that, right? I think that's like a great, like that is, you could never have something like that in today's environment. And these are the things that are going to come up. And I feel the more that we can kind of talk about these really unique opportunities, the more it creates really interesting thought processes for developers. And then in turn, they make great products that users are going to be able to genuinely enjoy and love. And I feel we are just cracking the surface of that. Yep.
Totally. And it's super exciting to think about because obviously all these different games over the years, like mainly surrender RPGs and whatnot, have these legendary players that emerge, right? You had Zezmer and RuneScape and whatnot. Like everyone loved that dude. They still do all these years on, including me. If he was so dialed into how the game was evolving and whatnot, obviously was grinding, maxing all the first levels. Like that's exactly the kind of person that can meaningfully contribute to the world building that's going on, right? And people will be willing to support, again, almost like an elected official. So anyway, lots of fun design space there. I wanted to double click a bit though on, the current state of things, the current lay of the land in terms of the absolutely shocking backlash that we've seen in so many scenarios around, just sort of broader gamer populations. I wonder, where you think it comes from and how we get past this, because it definitely seems to be a major obstacle currently.
Yeah, look, I obviously have spent a lot of time on it. Like I, made this jump from YouTube over to Polygon, knowing that, there is a lot of controversy around the topic of NFTs. I think there's a lot to unpack there. I think one, sometimes it's like, I question how much of it is a vocal minority for one. Like two, I'll give you an example. The 100 Thieves drop was yesterday. They did it on Polygon. They came out with communications. They didn't use even NFT as a term. They came out with communications that like the carbon footprint for a redemption is like the equivalent of 2 emails, right? Mm-hmm. They had a quarter, and the time window was only a couple hours. It was open to redeem, and it was free, right? So like that, take that with a grain of salt. But they had 250,000 people redeem it, right? So it's like, okay, there's something here. I think there's a little bit of like Web3 maximalism speaking past hardcore gamers. Hardcore gamers are notoriously known for digging in. They have done it on a variety of things. Like I even think of when I first started at YouTube gaming, it was like, you'll never be able to be in like gaming video. Like Twitch is supreme and rules all, right? Now I think the messaging has changed a little bit on that, right? And so people come along, look at like the resistance against free to play. There's a lot of misunderstanding around, you know, like, look, you think about like mining, right? People still remember when they couldn't get a graphics card because of Bitcoin miners. So there's understandably a sour taste in gamers' mouth for what some of the behaviors have happened. You can look at NFT projects that you're getting rugged or you're getting scammed on. Those definitely exist, right? You can look at like, you're not in the NFT space and you see like an ape going for $500,000. You're like, what is this, right? And so I think there's a lot of understandable uncertainty and misinformation that is kind of fueling this like strong resistance behind it, right? A lot of this isn't going to be solved in dialogue and communications, right? Like I can talk to people till I'm blue in the face about this and talk about opportunity. If you don't want to listen to it or you're so strongly adamant against it, it's not going to make much progress. The one thing that is tried and true and over time always wins is if you have a really great product and users want to play in that product, that will prevail. And so I think a lot of what we as an industry need to do is worry less about that, you know, one, we should be listening, have empathy for the counterpoint of view. But I think a lot of it is develop great products and people will come to them over time. And I do think it's a little bit of marketing and messaging. Like, I think we do need to understand, like, I go back to that 100 Thieves example because they nailed it, right? They threaded the needle there. They get ahead of this conversation. It's about how you land that messaging that's really important. The other thing too, it's like, you have had people that are just jamming this like idea of an NFT into like a game, right? And I don't think that works well either, right? It's like people want to be able to play the game that they've been playing because they've enjoyed it. You don't need to just throw over and like put that game on the blockchain, right. Give like people care about these open economies and marketplaces. People care about governance. Some people just want to play a chill video game and that's cool too, right? So I think over time, some of this stuff will settle itself out. And I'll be honest with you, like I'm like zero bothered by it. Like I listen. I feel like a really good understanding of the counterpoints. I'm empathetic to that. I think there's a lot of work as an industry we need to do because they're valid counterpoints. We shouldn't be dismissive of it. We shouldn't be elitist about whatever we're building. But I think it's really important to like keep your head down and build and hear some of those concerns, adjust accordingly, but keep building it and show great examples.
No, love that. Yeah, wanted to touch on before we go to wrap up, sort of where your head's at. I mean, I'm always skeptical of predictions, but to the extent you might be willing to share some thought just on, you know, both the intersection of crypto and gaming and just gaming more broadly, like sort of where we're headed, how you're viewing that trajectory. Obviously, you've had pretty unique insight into it after your sort of, YouTube career and now digging in on the Web3 side. So curious where your head's at.
Yeah, I mean, I would say anybody that says they know where we're going, I would not trust and would call them a liar flat out. I think the beauty of all of this is we're building the plane that's already in flight and we're going to figure out where it takes us and where we land. And I think that's the excitement about why we're in this industry. It's anyone's best guess. I do think though, you're going to see, like I said, like kind of touching on this point, like your people are going to continue to be shown great examples and you're going to start to usher in more people into this space. You have a lot of Gen Z is kind of ruling the world right now. And they look at gaming as their number one form of entertainment. They look at gaming as their number one form of social community. A lot of them are purchasing crypto. It's becoming really easier to do as far as access. I think regulation is going to be more than welcomed, right? Like obviously we all have opinions on what does that mean, but it takes away like the ambiguity of it, right? And provides much more clear guidelines. I think you're going to start to see that. And this convergence over the next like 24 to 36 months is going to lead to like just more people being crypto native, right? They're going to be really familiar. They're going to come into these games and these apps and experiences and totally get it. Right now, it's like, dude, you know, trying to explain to somebody that doesn't get like, you know, how you set up a MetaMask, well, like what is all of this? Like, what is this versus this, right? Like what's a L1 versus an L2? Explaining that to people that are not spending time in that space, you know, it's the moon to them, right? But all of that, like the education and evangelizing is going to change. And so I think what you're going to see is in 2 or 3 years, we are going to stop having these like conversations about onboarding and educating. And I think there's going to be so many like crypto native people. It'll be such common knowledge in this younger generation of Gen Z that are going to be, you know, inevitably in 5 to 10 years will be key decision makers at big companies and be leading big roles. And I think a lot of it will become abundantly more clear. I also think you look at from a regulation perspective, it's a lot of, you know, I don't want to say boomers, but it is that this is wild to wrap their head around, right? And so you're going to also see millennials start to come into powers and positions politically that understand a lot of this much better and can articulate it much more clearly. And so I think there's a lot of really positive long-term tailwinds that are starting to happen. And I just think it's not easy for everybody to see it, but I think we're starting to see a great convergence. And we have really great leaders across the Web3 industry that are able to articulate and help bring these people along. So yeah, my prediction is like, it will not feel like the wild, wild west in just 2 or 3 years time. And there will be a lot more like certainty around the space, much more appreciation around the space, and much more understanding.
Absolutely, yeah, and no, couldn't agree more on the you know, the Web3 sort of proponents who are very articulate and concise around this stuff. I think they're doing a great job at sort of you know, laying down a potential playbook for regulators, etc. That's still one of the things that keeps me up at night. You know, obviously, I firmly believe that the vast majority of economic activity is still going to happen in regulated markets, but I'm still concerned that maybe there'll be like an overextension, right? Because that tends to happen when regulators feel like things are getting away from them a bit. So we'll see how that evolves. My fingers are crossed.
You and me both. So, I'm cautiously optimistic, my friend. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, before we wrap, wanted to also basically give you the opportunity to sort of share any advice, I guess, you give people coming into the space, whether that's developers, people personally, professionally, you know, idle curiosity. You tell me.
Yeah. Look, I think now's a great time to jump in. You know, again, don't be afraid that you don't know everything, right? Like a lot of people, like we are all learning. Things are changing every single day. This industry is, you know, rapidly evolving. If you're sitting on the sidelines and you're looking for an opportune or perfect time to jump in, it never does exist, right? So make the jump. There are so many jobs open across Web3. I mean, it is absurd. Like Polygon Studios, we've got like 15 or 20 roles open right now. Across Polygon, there's like probably over 100, you know? So no better time to build. There's a lot of capital, no better time to raise money to start a company. So if you're an entrepreneur, go start it. You know, there's a lot of funding coming out into this space. If you want to be a builder and just like, you know, work in this industry, there's a ton of job openings. We need all the help we can get across Web3. There's so many different opportunities. You will learn as you go. And so don't be afraid to build. Don't be afraid to join the initiative. And I think like there's never been a better time than now to do so. So I give everybody as much encouragement. I personally have made the jump, and like I can tell you, only even a couple of days into it, I couldn't be happier that I did. And I'm like ecstatic that I made the jump over. And honestly, I can't imagine a world where I didn't at this point already. So come, we'll take everybody.
I love it. How's that for a call to action to wrap on? Brian, it's always a pleasure chatting. I'm super excited that you're, you know, diving in full time in the space now, and yeah, super excited to see how this whole sort of landscape evolves, how Polygon evolves with you at the helm. So thanks a lot for making the time.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks everybody. Take care.
Ryan, Piers, thanks so much, and it was a perfect note to end on.